A billionaire CEO decides to live on the streets disguised as a street cleaner. His search for reality leads him to an unexpected encounter with a kind street vendor, but his secret threatens to destroy the only authentic connection he has found. Before we follow this radical transformation, how about subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications? That way you won't miss the outcome of this and other incredible stories. And of course, tell us down below where you're watching from today. Now, let's get back to the story. Arthur Kensington III stood before the vast panoramic window of his 90th floor penthouse, an expensive glass of whiskey forgotten in his hand. The city stretched below, a glittering sea of lights against the dark velvet of night. A kingdom that he in many ways ruled. Kensington Enterprises. The name was etched onto imposing buildings, global financial reports, into the minds of investors and competitors. But there, at that vertiginous height, surrounded by the aseptic silence of minimalist luxury, Italian marble, priceless abstract art, invisible technology, Arthur felt an emptiness that no hostile takeover or rising stock index could fill. At 45, at the peak of his power, he felt like an astronaut floating disconnected from his home planet. Meetings were a blur of expensive suits, pie charts, and corporate jargon. Social events, a parade of forced smiles, superficial conversations about yachts and tax havens. He signed million-dollar checks for charity, read executive summaries about the social impact of his projects, but the reality of the streets below, of the lives he indirectly touched, was a closed book. A growing restlessness had been gnawing at him for months, an itch beneath the skin of his perfectly curated life. He found himself watching faces in the crowd as his chauffeured car glided through traffic, the fatigue in the eyes of the nurse at the bus stop, the carefree laughter of students on the corner, the determination on the face of the food delivery rider. They were vignettes of a life he didn't know, a pulsating energy from which he felt irremediably distant. How could a general command an army without ever having smelled gunpowder or felt the weight of mud on his boots? The metaphor haunted him. He needed to descend from the tower, not for a guided tour, but for an immersion. He needed to feel the rough texture of the reality his polished reports only alluded to. The idea, initially a bizarre fantasy, crystallized into a pressing need. To disappear. To become invisible, anonymous, an observer in the shadows of his own city. The execution required the kind of meticulous planning he usually reserved for a corporate merger. The only one he could trust was Peterson, the grizzled, taciturn superintendent of the Kensington Plaza, one of his father's first commercial buildings, now somewhat overshadowed by newer skyscrapers, but managed with canine loyalty by Peterson for decades. Arthur summoned him to his penthouse one Sunday evening, the air thick with secrecy. "Peterson, I need an extraordinary favor. Something that requires absolute discretion," Arthur began, watching the older man's reaction. Peterson, standing respectfully near the unlit fireplace, merely nodded, his eyes attentive. "Always at your service, Mr. Arthur." When Arthur revealed his plan to live and work incognito as a manual laborer, specifically a street cleaner, Peterson's impassive facade cracked. "Mr. Arthur, with all due respect, that's unthinkable, dangerous. You have no idea what the streets are like. What if you're recognized? What if something happens?" The genuine concern in his voice was evident. "I've considered the risks, Peterson," Arthur replied, his voice calm but firm. "That's why I need you. I need a false identity, a simple place, to stay clothes, some initial cash. I need you to be my only contact with this world while I'm out there." He explained his motivation, the need to reconnect, to understand. Peterson listened in silence, his face contorted with worry, but also a grudging understanding of the determined stubbornness he recognized in Arthur since boyhood. Finally, he sighed. "I'll do as you ask, Mr. Arthur, but under protest, and on the condition that you keep a prepaid cell phone on you at all times for emergencies, and that you call me once a week without fail." In the following weeks, Peterson worked in the shadows. He procured a used street cleaner's uniform through a contact at the outsourced cleaning company. "A cousin needs some extra cash, temporary work," was the cover story. He rented a small, furnished room at the back of a boarding house in a working-class neighborhood far from Arthur's usual circuits, paying in cash under a false name. He bought sturdy work boots, thick gloves, a nondescript cap. They created the identity of Marco Rossi, a distant immigrant, a widower, no close family, looking for hard labor to start over. Peterson gave Arthur basic instructions on the cleaners, routines, the shift timings, the informal hierarchy of the crews, the dangers to avoid. Don't draw attention, Mr. Arthur. I mean, Marco, do your job, head down, mouth shut. The first dawn as Marco was an assault on the senses. The cheap alarm clock shrieked at 4:30 a.m. in the cold, impersonal room. The smell of the uniform, a mix of old sweat and harsh disinfectant, was nauseating. The safety boots felt like lead weights. Walking through the dark, still sleeping streets to the cleaning company's service yard was like entering another dimension. The yard was a grey functional place smelling of diesel and refuse. Men and a few women, faces marked by sleep and resignation, gathered in small groups, smoking, sipping thin coffee from styrofoam cups. No one gave Marco a second glance. He was just another new face, probably temporary. Sal, the supervisor, a burly man with a cigarette-raspy voice, barely looked him in the eye. "You, Rossi? Grab a broom and a cart over there. Follow the Route 7 crew and stay out of my way." Route 7 covered a busy commercial area that only came alive later. At that hour, it was sweeping sidewalks littered with the previous night's debris, flyers, plastic cups, food scraps. The physical exertion was surprisingly intense. Arthur's muscles, accustomed to leather armchairs and light workouts at a private gym, screamed in protest. The broom handle chafed his soft hands despite the gloves. The trash cart, once it started filling up, was heavy and awkward to maneuver over curbs and drains. The noise of the awakening city, impatient horns, the rumble of buses, the clatter of shop grates being raised, was a strange cacophony. The smells were even worse. The sweet, putrid odor of piled garbage, the acrid fumes from exhausts, the stench of urine in some alleyways. He watched the first commuters, hurried workers, sleepy students, others like himself, invisible cogs in the city's machinery. No one noticed him, except perhaps for a fleeting glance of disdain or indifference. It was a disconcerting invisibility. Sal was a gruff taskmaster. "Faster, Rossi, this ain't a vacation," he'd yell occasionally. "Sweep that corner properly. You missed a spot." Arthur Marco learned to lower his head and obey, swallowing his bruised pride. At lunchtime, the crew sat on the curb or dirty park benches, opening lunch pails filled with rice, beans, and some kind of stew. The smell of the simple food made Arthur's stomach rumble even louder, but he felt too out of place to join them. He ate his hidden protein, bar behind a bush feeling like an intruder, an imposter. The loneliness in that moment was sharper than any solitude he'd felt in his empty penthouse. The weeks turned into a month, then 2. Arthur Marco persevered. His body adapted to the physical strain. His muscles grew defined, though often sore. His hands developed protective calluses. He learned to read the street, to anticipate the spots where trash accumulated most, to work more efficiently. He began exchanging a few words with his teammates, about the weather, about soccer, about the hardships of the job. They were superficial conversations, but they were a start, a tenuous thread of belonging. He began to understand the rough camaraderie, the dark humor, the resignation mixed with stubborn pride of these men and women doing the dirty work the city preferred to ignore. Peterson met him discreetly once a week at a cheap cafe far from his usual routes, handing him an envelope with cash and receiving a brief verbal report. "How is it going, Mr. Arthur?" "Difficult, Peterson, but I'm learning." He kept the prepaid phone off most of the time, resisting the urge to reconnect with his old world. He wanted the immersion to be as complete as possible. It was on a particularly hot and humid afternoon in late spring that he first met Sofia Alvarez. His route that day included the bustling central square near a small park. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the work was exhausting. He stopped for a moment to wipe the sweat from his forehead with his uniform sleeve, his head throbbing from fatigue and perhaps slight dehydration. That's when a delicious, familiar aroma wafted through the air, corn grilling on a flat top, melting cheese arepas. His eyes were drawn to a small, colorful food cart set up on the corner of the square. Behind the makeshift counter, a young woman with an easy smile and lively dark eyes was serving a line of customers with infectious energy. She moved quickly and efficiently, assembling the hot arepas, taking payment, exchanging a few friendly words with each person. It was Sophia. Arthur Marco watched her for a few minutes, fascinated by her grace and the apparent joy she took in her work, despite the intense heat. He approached the cart timidly when the line thinned, intending only to buy a bottle of water. "Hi, what can I get for you?" Sophia asked, her smile reaching her eyes as she wiped her hands on a cloth. Just some water, please," Marco replied, his voice a bit hoarse. He held out a crumpled bill. As she retrieved a cold water bottle from a cooler, her gaze lingered on him for an extra moment. She saw the dirty uniform, the tired face, the beads of sweat. "Wow, it's brutally hot today, isn't it? Working, sweeping, in this sun must be tough." There was genuine empathy in her voice, not pity. "It's a bit," Marco admitted. Sophia hesitated for a second, then picked up a warm arepa, fresh off the griddle, filled with melted white cheese. "Look, this one was left over from the last order. It's fresh. Would you like it? On the house for some energy." She held the arepa out to him. Marco was taken aback. He was just another sweaty street cleaner, a nobody. Why would she do that? He looked at the steaming arepa, then at her open smile. The hunger he felt wasn't just physical. It was a hunger for genuine human connection, something his money couldn't buy. I can't accept, miss. You work hard to sell these." "Nonsense," Sophia laughed. "It's just one arepa, and you look like you need it more than I do right now. Please take it. Consider it a neighborhood tax for keeping the square clean." Her humor disarmed him. He accepted the arepa with a mumbled thank you, feeling its comforting warmth in his calloused hands. He took a bite. The taste was simple but delicious, made with care. It was perhaps the best thing he had eaten in weeks. "Thank you. Thank you very much," he said sincerely. "My name is Marco." "Sophia," she replied, giving him a wink. "If you need more water or just some shade for a minute, feel free to hang around." That small, disinterested act of generosity, the way she treated him as an equal and neighbor, struck Arthur as Marco in an unexpected way. It was a ray of sunshine in his gray, anonymous world. In the following days, Marco's route seemed, coincidentally, or perhaps through Arthur's discreet manipulation via Peterson, to frequently include the square where Sophia worked. He made a point of passing by, sometimes just for water, other times indulging in an arepa. Sophia always greeted him with a smile and a few words. "Hey, Marco, tough day today?" "Morning, Sophia. Business good?" They began to talk more. He was a good listener, and she was a keen observer of life in the square. She spoke about her regular customers, the elderly lady who always bought a cheese arepa, and told stories about the neighborhood's past, the hurried student grabbing breakfast, the street musician who sometimes played for a snack. She had a light way of talking about her struggles, the expensive cart permit, her worry about her sick mother at home, the dream of one day having a real little cafe, not just a street cart. Marco listened intently, asking discreet questions. He learned Sophia was an immigrant, had come with her family as a child, and worked tirelessly to help at home and save for her dream. He admired her resilience, her unwavering optimism, despite obvious hardships. She, in turn, seemed intrigued by Marco. He was quiet, observant, spoke in an educated manner that didn't quite match the image of an ordinary street cleaner. "You don't seem like you're from around here, Marco," she commented one day, as he savored, an arepa leaning against a nearby tree. "The way you talk, did you study?" Marco Arthur felt a chill. The lie felt increasingly heavy. "I had, some education, yes, a long time ago," he answered evasively. "Life takes turns, Sophia." "That's true," she agreed thoughtfully. "But the important thing is not to let it knock you down for good, right? You can always get back up." Her optimism was infectious, but it also heightened his guilt. He began to feel deeply conflicted. Life, as Marco, despite the physical hardships and initial loneliness, offered an authenticity he had never experienced. The conversations with Sophia, the feeling of being seen as an equal, The simplicity of the routine as it was real, but it was all built on a lie. He was Arthur Kensington III, a man of almost limitless resources who could solve Sophia's problems. With a snap of his fingers, he could pay her permit fees for years, fund her mother's treatment, buy her dream cafe outright. But doing so would mean destroying the Marco persona, destroying the genuine connection they were building. Meanwhile, in Arthur's world, things continued. Peterson discreetly updated him on urgent matters at Kensington Enterprises. Occasionally, Arthur had to disappear for a day, returning to his penthouse for ultra-confidential meetings or to sign important documents, swapping the cleaner's uniform for a bespoke suit. These transitions were increasingly jarring. The luxury of his penthouse felt empty, the business talk superficial. His executives whispered among themselves about the CEO's new focus, his apparent distraction, his unexpected questions about the social impact of company projects. Arthur felt like an actor in his own life, more authentic sweeping streets than chairing board meetings. The bond with Sophia deepened. He started doing small, discreet favors for her, fixing a wobbly wheel on her cart, giving her a tip about a cheaper cheese supplier he'd heard about, offering to watch the cart for a few minutes while she ran an errand. They were small gestures, things Marco could plausibly do. And Sophia reciprocated with her lively conversation, her easy smile, and occasionally an extra arepa, because business was good today. He was falling in love with her resilience, her kindness, the way she found joy in small things. And he felt increasingly guilty about his secret identity, an invisible chasm between them. He knew the truth would have to come out eventually, but he postponed the moment, terrified of losing the only real connection he'd found in years. The double life was becoming unsustainable. The summer heat settled over the city like a damp, heavy blanket, transforming the streets into open-air ovens, and the job of sweeping under the relentless sun a daily trial. The Praça das Flores, however, seemed to absorb the heat and radiate it back as vibrant energy. The central fountain offered noisy, bubbling relief, attracting children who splashed their hands in the water and thirsty pigeons. The lawns were living tapestries of colorful picnic blankets, students reading under trees, and executives trying to escape office air conditioning for a quick outdoor lunch. And there, on the most strategic corner, under a new cheerful yellow and white striped awning that had replaced the old faded one, Sofia Alvarez's cart was the epicenter of tempting aromas and constant motion. Marco Twark Arthur, pushing his now familiar cart along the square's paths, watched the scene with the complex mix of feelings that had become his constant companion. There was genuine pride seeing the lines forming for Sophia's arepas, tangible proof of her talent and hard work. He overheard customers praise as he swept nearby. "This shredded beef one is the best in the city. I've never had such perfect grilled halloumi. Her friendliness alone is worth the visit." Each comment was a small victory for Sophia. But for Arthur, it was also a sharp reminder of the colossal distance between their worlds. He wondered what those customers would say if they knew the silent street cleaner collecting their used napkins secretly owned half the commercial buildings surrounding the square. The irony was almost suffocating. His own existence as Marco had acquired a strange normalcy. The physical routine, waking before dawn, the smell of disinfectant from the uniform, the weight of the broom, the familiar ache in his back muscles, at the end of the day, had become the backdrop to an intense inner life of observation and reflection. He knew the characters of the square, the old chess player, Schachmatist, who set up his board on the same bench every day, awaiting a challenger, the young cellist who practiced melancholic pieces under the bandstand on quieter afternoons, the group of teenage skateboarders who defied the rules, and the park security guards' patience, with their daring maneuvers. He watched them, absorbing the small vignettes of urban life, feeling both a part of and utterly separate from it all. The camaraderie with the cleaning crew had deepened within the rough and tumble limits of that environment. He learned that Tony, the eldest, was a doting grandfather who carried crumpled photos of his grandkids in his wallet. He heard Javier's complaints about debts and his dream of returning to his home country. He shared the silence of breaks with them, the taste of reheated coffee, the universal gripe about the boss, Sal. Sal, in turn, had developed a grudging respect for Marco. He realized he wasn't just hard-working but strangely efficient, and his calm presence seemed to have a pacifying effect on the crew. "Rossi, you're quiet, but you ain't stupid," Sal commented one day after Marco suggested a minor route change that saved everyone time. "Keep it up, and maybe you'll last longer than most." Coming from Sal, it was practically an effusive compliment. But it was Sophia who remained the gravitational center of his world in the square. The daily break to buy a cold water, which he insisted on paying for despite her protests, was the pretext for a few minutes of conversation. He'd lean against a nearby tree, watching her work, while she, between customers, shared fragments of her day, her life. "Marco, you won't believe it," she exclaimed one day, her eyes shining with excitement. "Seu Armando, from the used bookstore around the corner, gave me a box of books he was going to discard. There are some old novels, poetry. Imagine how beautiful it would be to have these in my café com prosa." He smiled at the simplicity of her enthusiasm. Another day he found her frustrated, almost crying. "The inspectors came by earlier, Marco. They complained that my umbrella is taking up an extra inch of the sidewalk. 1 inch. They gave me a warning. There are so many rules, so many things to take away the little we earn." He listened, feeling helpless anger boil inside him. He knew that, as Arthur Kensington, he could resolve that with a call to the mayor's office, but as Marco, he could only offer a friendly ear and words of solace. "It's unfair, Sophia, but don't let it shake you. You're stronger than they are." He started doing small, discreet repairs on her cart, using tools borrowed from the park maintenance crew, always with the excuse that he had a knack for it. He tightened a loose screw on the frame, fixed the faucet on the small water container she used, even patched a tear in the awning with heavy-duty tape. They were small gestures, things Marco could plausibly do. Sophia thanked him with a sincerity that touched him. "Marco, you're a guardian angel disguised as a street cleaner," she joked once, offering him a double arepa. The disguise was more real than she knew, and the irony was painful. Donna Eleanor's health was the barometer of Sophia's mood. On good days, when her mother could breathe easier and even sit by the window to watch the world go by, Sophia arrived at the square with a lighter step, humming softly as she heated the griddle. On bad days, the shadow of worry darkened her eyes, and she worked in silence, her brow furrowed. Marco learned to read these signs, offering an extra word of encouragement or simply working quietly beside her at the end of the day, helping dismantle the cart, a constant, supportive presence. "She had a rough night, Marco," she confided one particularly gloomy morning after a long coughing fit from her mother. "The doctor at the clinic insists she needs to see the specialist, Dr. Ramirez. Says it might be something more serious than the chronic bronchitis they diagnosed before. But the consultation, it costs almost a month's rent for our room." She rubbed her tired eyes. "I feel so powerless. I work so hard, but it feels like I'm always chasing, never able to save enough for a real emergency." Hearing that was like a physical blow to Arthur. Powerless? He who could move financial mountains with a phone call? The discrepancy between his hidden reality and her visible struggle was obscene. The temptation to intervene, to use his resources, became a daily battle. He discreetly researched foundations offering medical aid to low-income families, wondering how he could channel a significant donation completely anonymously. But the process was complex, slow, and didn't guarantee the help would reach Donna Eleanor specifically. While wrestling with his moral dilemma, Arthur's double life continued. His business trips, as Arthur Kensington III, became more frequent, justified by international negotiations or conferences. During these periods, Marco would fall ill or need to resolve urgent personal matters. Peterson covered his tracks with increasing anxiety. "Mr. Arthur, Mrs. Gable is running out of credible excuses," and Davenport asked another question about you in yesterday's meeting, something about your reduced availability. On one of these trips, Arthur attended a tech conference in Geneva. He sat through a lavish dinner with other global CEOs, discussing the future of artificial intelligence. But his mind was thousands of miles away, wondering if Sophia had managed to sell enough arepas that day to buy her mother's medicine. He felt like a hologram, a projection of himself. Upon returning, the transition back to Marco was even more jarring. Swapping the private jet for the crowded bus, the Brioni suit for the sweaty uniform, the five-star hotel suite for the cramped room in the boarding house. It was like diving into ice water, but strangely it was as Marco sweeping the Praça das Flores that he felt more grounded, more real, despite the fundamental lie underpinning that reality. The incident with Davenport on the street had put him on high alert. He became even more careful, avoiding certain areas on his days as Marco, keeping his cap pulled low. But the city was small for a man of his prominence, even in disguise. He also noticed that Sophia, despite her open and trusting nature, seemed to be observing Marco with a new thoughtfulness. It wasn't suspicion exactly, but a dawning awareness of incongruities. A casual remark about how he sometimes used an unusually sophisticated word, a question about where he'd learned to fix things so well, a comment on how he seemed different from the other cleaners. "You have hard-working hands, Marco," she said once, glancing at his calluses as he handed her change. "But your eyes look like they've read a lot of books." He looked away, his heart pounding faster. Was she seeing through him? Then came the night of Donna Elena's acute respiratory crisis. Sophia's panicked call to Marco's prepaid phone, a number he'd given her for cart emergencies, came just before midnight. "Marco, it's Mama. She can't breathe. She's turning blue. I called an ambulance, but they said it could take a while. I don't know what to do." This time Arthur didn't hesitate in his other world. While talking to Sophia on Marco's phone, calming her, telling her he was on his way, he was using his personal smartphone to call Dr. Ramirez at home in the Kensington Enterprises private ambulance service, ordering them to Sophia's address immediately. Top priority, all costs billed directly to a discreet account of his personal foundation. He quickly changed into Marco's clothes and hailed a taxi, ordered via Arthur's app, to Sophia's working-class neighborhood, telling the driver to drop him off a few blocks away. He ran the final blocks, arriving at the simple boarding house just as the state-of-the-art private ambulance pulled up, its lights flashing discreetly. No loud siren, he'd instructed. Efficient paramedics were already moving a stretcher carrying Donna Elena, now with an oxygen mask, into the vehicle. Sophia stood beside them, her face streaked with tears, looking small and lost. "Marco," she cried upon seeing him arrive, breathless. She ran into his arms, sobbing. "They came so fast. I couldn't believe it. They seem different from the public." "Ambulance. The important thing is they came, Sophia," he said, holding her tightly for a moment, offering physical comfort that felt entirely inadequate. "Your mother will be all right. They'll take care of her." He guided her into the ambulance, sitting on the bench opposite the stretcher. The ride to Kensington Memorial was surreal. The ambulance interior was a mini ICU, monitors beeping softly, gleaming equipment. The paramedics worked with calm professionalism, checking Donna Elena's vitals, adjusting the oxygen. Sophia held her mother's limp hand, her eyes fixed on the pale face, whispering words of encouragement in Spanish. Arthur Marco watched it all, feeling like a spectre, an invisible director in this play. He was the cause of this efficiency, this first-class care, but he had to pretend to be just Marco, the street cleaner friend, as helpless as Sophia in the face of the crisis. The guilt was a bitter taste in his mouth. At Kensington Memorial, the reception was seamless. A team was waiting at the private emergency entrance. Donna Elena was whisked immediately into an intensive care treatment room. Dr. Ramirez, the renowned pulmonologist with graying hair and a serious but kind demeanor, appeared almost instantly. He greeted Sophia with professionalism and compassion, explaining he was already briefed on the case, thanks to the emergency dispatch alert, he said, following the discreet instructions he'd received. Sophia was awestruck by the difference. It's so different from the municipal hospital, Marco," she whispered, as they waited in the quiet, carpeted corridor of the private emergency wing. "So clean, so fast. It doesn't even feel like a hospital." "It's a good hospital, Sophia. She's in the best place," Marco replied, choosing his words carefully. They spent hours in the elegant but tense waiting room. Sophia paced, wringing her hands. Marco sat watching her, offering water, a packet of crackers from the vending machine, paid for with Marco's dwindling coins, listening as she talked about childhood memories with her mother, about her fear of losing her. He desperately wanted to truly comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay because he would ensure it, but he had to restrain himself, offering only Marco's silent, solid presence. He saw her strength falter, replaced by a raw, childlike fear. What if she lost her mother? What would become of her? The responsibility he felt for her became almost unbearable. Finally, Dr. Ramirez returned. He called Sophia into his consulting room. Marco followed, lingering discreetly near the door. He heard the doctor explain the diagnosis clearly. Advanced COPD, complicated by severe bacterial pneumonia. The need for ICU admission for several days to stabilize the infection and oxygen levels, followed by long-term treatment with specific, expensive medications, home oxygen therapy, and respiratory physiotherapy. A serious prognosis, but with good chances of stabilization and improved quality of life with the proper treatment. Then came the inevitable question of costs. Sophia visibly paled as the doctor began detailing the procedures and medications involved. Marco saw the exact moment despair threatened to engulf her again. It was then that Dr. Ramirez, following Arthur's prearranged script, introduced the anonymous donation. Fortunately, Sophia, the doctor said with a gentle smile, we have extraordinary news on that front. Kensington Memorial recently received a very generous endowment from a highly discreet local philanthropic foundation. This donation is specifically earmarked to fully cover the treatment costs for patients with severe pulmonary conditions who lack insurance or resources. We reviewed your mother's case and she qualifies perfectly. So you can rest assured, her entire treatment here, including the ICU stay, the medications, the home oxygen equipment and the physiotherapy, it will all be covered by this grant. Sophia stared, speechless for a moment, her eyes wide. Then she covered her face with her hands and began to cry, deep sobs of pure relief and disbelief. A donation, anonymous, but it's impossible. It's a miracle. She looked up at the doctor, then turned towards Marco, who watched from the doorway with a forced neutral expression. Marco, did you hear? A miracle? I heard, Sophia. That's wonderful news, Marco said, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. He felt a sickening mix of relief for her and profound disgust at his own manipulation. This miracle was him. The disguised billionaire playing guardian angel, buying solutions while hiding behind a facade. The moral complexity of his actions hit him full force. In the following days, while Donna Eleanor remained in the ICU, responding well to the intensive treatment, Sophia was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The gratitude for the anonymous angel was immense, but the worry over her mother's recovery and the need to keep the cart running left her exhausted. Marco became her constant shadow, her silent support system. He ensured she ate the meals brought to the hospital waiting room, urged her to take short naps on the uncomfortable sofas, and offered to watch the cart for longer periods so she could spend more time at her mother's bedside. The intimacy forged in the crucible of the hospital crisis was undeniable, intense, but for Arthur it was an intimacy built on quicksand. When Donna Elena was finally discharged, still weak but breathing more easily with the help of the portable oxygen concentrator delivered to their home by the foundation, Sophia felt that a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The anonymous foundation arranged for the initial supply of expensive medications and scheduled the first home physiotherapy sessions. Sophia returned to work at the square with fierce determination, fueled by gratitude and renewed hope. She spoke constantly of the mysterious benefactor, wondering who could be so kind, weaving fantasies about destiny and good fortune, and every word she uttered was like a small needle prick to Arthur's conscience. The lie was becoming a monstrous entity, and he felt he was losing control. The intimacy born of shared crisis felt tainted by his fundamental dishonesty. It was into this atmosphere of fragile recovery and fervent gratitude that the harsh reality of city bureaucracy intruded. That Monday morning, as Marco helped Sophia wipe down the griddle before starting the day, the two city inspectors and the police officer materialized like specters at a feast. The abrupt accusations about the expired license, which Sophia would later confirm she had paid, a victim of a glitch in the city's system, and the fabricated complaints about obstruction were delivered with cold indifference. The threat to seize her cart, her livelihood, her dream in progress at the very moment she needed stability most, felt like a cosmic cruelty. Arthur saw the hope drain from Sophia's eyes, replaced by panic and despair. He saw the tears of frustration well up as she tried futilely to reason with the impassive men. He saw the calculation in the inspector's eyes, perhaps sensing her vulnerability, perhaps acting on behalf of unseen interests, the disgruntled competing shop owner. And in that instant, the tightrope he'd been walking snapped. The carefully constructed walls between Arthur and Marco crumbled. The guilt, the compassion, the rage against injustice, and the overwhelming desire to protect her converged into a single, irrefutable imperative. He stepped forward, moving deliberately between Sophia and the officials. His body straightened, the subservient slump of Marco vanishing, replaced by the inherent command of Arthur Kensington III. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said, and his voice resounded in the square with a calm, icy authority that made the three men flinch, staring at this uniformed worker who spoke as if he owned the very pavement beneath their feet. "I believe there is a serious misunderstanding here, and I assure you it will be resolved immediately." Sophia turned towards him, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide with shock, confusion, and a dawning, terrifying suspicion that flickered within their dark depths. The ground seemed to vanish beneath her feet. The world she knew was about to shatter. The unexpected authority in Marco's voice, the sudden shift in his posture from humble street cleaner to someone radiating cold, unquestionable power, left the inspectors and the police officer momentarily speechless, blinking as if awakened from a bureaucratic stupor. But it was Sophia's face that held Arthur's gaze. The initial shock was rapidly giving way to a painful, dawning comprehension, her dark eyes widening as they fixed on him, searching, questioning, the storm of conflicting emotions, disbelief, fear, and a terrible nascent suspicion churning within them. "And who the hell are you to guarantee anything?" The older inspector, a man with a graying mustache and a prominent belly, finally retorted, trying to recover his bluster, though his voice now held a note of uncertainty. "You're just the garbage man sweeping the square." Arthur ignored the attempted slight, his steely gaze fixed on the three men. He knew this was the Rubicon. The Marco mask had irrevocably fallen. "My name," he stated, his voice quiet but resonating with a silent power that seemed to make the very air crackle, "is Arthur Kensington III." The name landed like a physical blow in the quiet morning square. The three officials visibly paled. The police officer instinctively straightened his posture. Kensington. The name was omnipresent in the city, synonymous with towering skyscrapers, multi-billion-dollar deals, high society philanthropy, and an almost feudal level of influence. A street cleaner couldn't possibly be Arthur Kensington III. It was absurd. Yet there was something in the man's presence, in the glacial certainty of his gaze, that annihilated all doubt. "And this lady," Arthur continued, gesturing protectively towards Sophia, who was now staring at him with her mouth agape, the awful truth crashing down on her, "is Sophia Alvarez, and she is, as of this moment, under my personal and legal protection." He reached into the inner pocket of his worn uniform vest, a place Peterson had insisted he keep a few Arthur essentials for extreme emergencies, and produced a thin, platinum card case. He selected a minimalist yet unmistakably expensive business card, bearing the discreet Kensington Enterprises crest, and handed it to the police officer, who took it with trembling fingers, as if handling a radioactive artifact. "Officer Miller, isn't it?" Arthur said, reading the name on the officer's badge with a photographic memory that startled the man. "I suggest you contact the police chief's office directly and verify the validity of Ms. Alvarez's permit. I have strong reason to believe there's been an administrative error, or, possibly, a veiled attempt at extortion by your inspectors." Glanced meaningfully at the two grey-uniformed men, who were now sweating profusely despite the mild morning air. As for the alleged complaints about obstruction, Kensington Enterprises happens to manage the maintenance contract for this square. With the city, my building engineering team will assess the situation immediately and make any necessary adjustments, if indeed any are required. His gaze swept over the three men. Now, gentlemen, if you don't mind, I'm sure you have more pressing matters to attend to elsewhere in the city. The situation here is resolved. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command cloaked in icy politeness. The shift in dynamics was absolute. Bureaucratic arrogance evaporated, replaced by nervous deference. "Yes, Mr. Kensington. Of course, Mr. Kensington," stammered the older inspector. There must have been a mistake, certainly. We'll check everything back at the sub-precinct immediately. We apologize for the disturbance, Miss Alvarez. Have a good day." They practically tripped over themselves in their hasty retreat, the police officer pocketing the business card as if it were a sacred relic, avoiding Arthur's gaze. Within seconds, the square seemed to return to its normal rhythm, the sun glinting off the flower beds, children laughing in the playground. But for Arthur and Sophia, the world had irrevocably changed in that brief span of time. The silence left between them was deafening, thick with unasked questions, swirling emotions. Arthur turned slowly to face Sophia. The moment he had both dreaded, and, in a way, longed for, had arrived in the most public and damaging way possible. She was still standing motionless, the color completely drained from her face, her eyes fixed on him with an expression of utter shock and dawning heartbreak. "Marco," she whispered again, the name a painful ghost between them. "Arthur Kensington, the owner of all this?" Her eyes flickered around at the imposing buildings flanking the square, many bearing the Kensington name. You were pretending all this time? The street cleaner, the friendship, was it all a lie?" The tears that welled up now were not of despair, but of profound betrayal and confusion. "It wasn't a lie, Sophia. Not the friendship, not the respect I feel for you," he said urgently, taking a hesitant step towards her, but she flinched back as if burned. Marco was a disguise, yes, but the feelings were real. I needed to understand. Life outside my bubble. I needed to see the city through different eyes. And then I met you and everything changed. Changed? Her voice rose, laced with sharp pain. "You watched me struggle, Marco, as Arthur, whoever you are. You saw my sick mother, my money worries, my stupid dream about the cafe, and you just stood there, listening, pretending to be an equal, while you could have fixed everything with a snap of your fingers. You played with me, you played with my life. No, I never wanted to play with you," he insisted, feeling the weight of his deception crush him. "I wanted to help, but I didn't know how without destroying what we had. The anonymous donation for your mother. That was me, Sophia. I couldn't stand seeing you suffer. The revelation about the donation, instead of soothing her, seemed to wound her even more deeply. You..." She stared at him, her eyes blazing with anger and humiliation. "So even the help, the miracle, was your manipulation. You bought my mother's treatment like you buy stocks? I thanked you. I prayed for you. And it was you all along, laughing at my desperation." "I wasn't laughing, Sophia. I was desperate to help, but afraid of losing you if you knew who I was." He tried to explain, but the words felt hollow in the face of her pain. "Losing what? The street cleaner friend?" She laughed, a harsh, joyless sound. "He never really existed, did he? He was just a character in your social experiment, a bored billionaire's whim?" She shook her head, tears streaming freely now. "I trusted you, Marco. I shared my lunch, my worries, my dreams with you. And you were this." She looked him up and down, no longer seeing the uniform, but the man behind it, and what she saw made her recoil. "I need to be alone. Please go away." Her words were like knives. Arthur wanted to argue, to plead, but he saw the insurmountable wall that had risen between them, a wall built brick by his own deceit. He nodded slowly, feeling a desolate emptiness. "I'll go. But please, Sophia, know that nothing I felt was false, and I still want to help, the right way, if you'll ever let me." He turned and walked away slowly, leaving her alone beside her. Colorful cart, which now seemed a fragile symbol in the suddenly hostile square. He felt the curious stares of the few passers-by who had witnessed the scene. Marco's anonymity was gone, replaced by the unwelcome notoriety of Arthur Kensington III, the eccentric billionaire. He walked aimlessly through the streets, no longer Marco the observer, but Arthur the exposed, the man who had everything and in that moment felt he had lost the only thing that truly mattered. The days that followed were a blur of controlled chaos and profound personal anguish for Arthur. The CEO in disguise story exploded in the media, fueled perhaps by leaks from the disgruntled inspectors, or simply by the sheer bizarre nature of it. Tabloids had a field day. Talk shows debated his motives. Photos of Marco sweeping streets were endlessly juxtaposed with images of Arthur at glamorous galas. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire plays poor," "The wolf in cleaner's clothing," "Tycoon deceives humble vendor." At Kensington Enterprises, the emergency board meeting was volatile. Davenport, smelling blood, led the charge for Arthur's ouster. "This is a PR nightmare, Arthur. Gross negligence. You've made the company a laughingstock and jeopardized your fiduciary duty for a personal lark." But Arthur, surprisingly, found a new resolve in the crisis. He didn't offer excuses. He spoke honestly about his motivations, the disconnection, the search for grounding, the unexpected connection with Sophia. He admitted his methods were flawed, the deception wrong, the outcome painful. But he didn't apologize for seeking understanding or for the lessons learned. He then pivoted, outlining concrete new initiatives focused on community engagement, small business support, and employee well-being, ideas born directly from his time as Marco. His raw honesty, combined with a clear vision for a more socially conscious Kensington Enterprises, resonated unexpectedly with a faction of the board, particularly the younger members and those representing ethical investment funds. The motion to remove him failed narrowly. He kept his position, but the dynamics had shifted. He was no longer just the untouchable titan. He was a leader who had shown vulnerability and a willingness to change. His first priority was Sophia. He instructed Peterson to try and locate her discreetly, respecting her stated wish to be left alone, but ensuring she wasn't facing hardship because of the scandal he'd caused. Peterson reported back a few days later with grim news. Sophia and her mother had vacated the boarding house room, leaving no forwarding address. The landlord said Sophia seemed distressed and just wanted to disappear from the media attention. Arthur felt a fresh wave of guilt. He used his legal team anonymously to ensure the city dropped any charges related to the expired permit and cleared her record. He also set up a more robust, truly anonymous trust managed by Dr. Ramirez to guarantee Donna Elena's ongoing medical care indefinitely, wherever they might be. It felt like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic of his personal life, but it was all he could do. He threw himself into work, but with a different focus. The new community initiatives became his passion. He visited neighborhood centers, talked to small business owners, listened to community leaders, this time as Arthur Kensington, but with the ears and empathy of Marco. He funded job training programs, microloan schemes for aspiring entrepreneurs, often thinking of Sophia's Café con Prosa notebook, and affordable housing projects. His philanthropy became less about large, impersonal checks to established institutions and more about targeted, grassroots support. His executives were initially baffled, then grudgingly impressed by the tangible results and the positive local press these initiatives generated, slowly rebuilding the company's image on a foundation of genuine community engagement. Daniel Hayes, now a key advisor and friend, was instrumental in shaping these programs, ensuring they were ethically sound and truly beneficial. Their partnership, forged in crisis, became the moral compass of the revitalized Kensington Enterprises. Months bled into a year, then nearly 2. The media frenzy died down, replaced by the next fleeting scandal. Arthur's life found a new equilibrium, quieter, more purposeful, but still marked by the ache of Sophia's absence. He dated occasionally, moving within his own social strata, but found the interactions lacking the simple authenticity he'd shared with her over arepas and coffee. He often found himself driving through different parts of the city on weekends, scanning street corners, farmers' markets, anywhere a colorful food cart might appear, a foolish, desperate hope flickering within him. It was during a site visit for a potential affordable housing project in Bayside, a smaller, working-class coastal town about 2 hours' drive from the city, that fate intervened. Walking down the town's modest main street after the meeting, discussing zoning issues with his architect, a familiar, delicious aroma stopped him mid-sentence. Corn, cheese, arepas. His breath caught. It couldn't be. He followed the scent, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, down a quieter side street lined with small, independent shops. And there it was, not a cart, but a small, charming storefront. A neatly painted sign, swayed gently in the sea breeze, Café com Prosa. Flowers spilled from window boxes. Through the clean glass window, he could see cozy wooden tables, bookshelves lining one wall, local art displayed. And behind the counter, wiping it down with a cloth, her back to him initially, was a figure instantly recognizable, even with her hair styled differently. Shorter now, Sophia. He stood across the street, hidden partially by a parked van, a whirlwind of emotions washing over him, disbelief, joy, trepidation. She looked, well, more than well. She looked serene, confident, the owner of her own destiny. He saw her laugh at something a customer said. He saw Donna Eleanor sitting in a comfortable armchair near the window, bathed in sunlight, peacefully knitting, the discreet nasal cannula of her oxygen supply barely noticeable. She looked healthier, happier than he'd ever seen her. His first instinct was to run, to not disturb this peaceful new life she had clearly built for herself, far away from him and the chaos he represented. But then Sophia turned, glanced towards the street, and her eyes met his across the distance. There was a flicker of recognition, a momentary widening of her eyes, a sudden stillness in her movements. The easy smile faded, replaced by a complex expression he couldn't immediately decipher. Not anger, not shock, but perhaps weary, resignation, or cautious curiosity. She held his gaze for a long moment, long enough for him to feel exposed, vulnerable. Then, slowly, deliberately, she gave the faintest, almost imperceptible nod towards the cafe door. It wasn't a warm welcome, but it wasn't a dismissal either. It was an allowance. Taking a deep breath, feeling as nervous as he had on his first day as Marco, Arthur crossed the street and pushed open the door to Café com Prosa. A small bell tinkled softly. The aroma of fresh coffee and baking enveloped him, warm and inviting. The handful of customers looked up briefly, then returned to their conversations or books. Donna Helena smiled at him warmly from her armchair, a knowing twinkle in her eyes, as if she'd been expecting him all along. Sophia finished serving a customer, then turned to face him, wiping her hands on her apron. Her expression was carefully neutral, polite but guarded. "Sophia," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Kensington," she replied, her tone even. "It's been a long time. What brings you to Bayside?" The formality was a shield, he knew. "I was in the area for business," he stammered slightly, feeling oddly inadequate. "I saw the sign. Your cafe. It's wonderful. Exactly as you dreamed. It." He gestured around the cozy space, genuinely impressed. A faint blush touched her cheeks, but her guard remained up. "Thank you. It took a lot of hard work. And," she added, a subtle edge to her voice, "a very timely, anonymous small business. Loan that appeared just when I needed it most." She held his gaze, letting him know that she knew, or at least strongly suspected, the source of that luck too. "Sophia, about that. About everything," he began, wanting desperately to apologize again, to explain, to bridge the gap between them. She raised a hand slightly, stopping him. "Arthur." The use of his first name startled him. "We don't need to rehash the past. What happened, happened. It was painful. You made choices. I made choices. I chose to leave the city, to start over where nobody knew my name or yours, where I could build this on my own terms with the help that was offered, yes, but with my own sweat." She looked around her small cafe with quiet pride. And I did. She met his eyes again, and he saw not forgiveness, perhaps not yet, but a measure of peace, of acceptance. I was angry for a long time, she admitted softly. Felt betrayed, humiliated. But holding on to anger doesn't bake arepas or pay the bills. I learned a lot, too, about myself, about the complexities of people. I learned too, Sophia, he said earnestly. More than you can imagine. You changed my perspective on everything. On my work, on my life, on what truly matters. He hesitated, then plunged ahead. I know I don't deserve it, but I was hoping maybe we could start again. Not as Marco, and Sophia, or as CEO and victim, but just as people. Could I perhaps just be a customer, buy an arepa, maybe even talk sometime? Sophia studied his face, searching his eyes for sincerity. He saw the internal debate, the caution warring with perhaps a flicker of the old connection. Donna Elena watched them from her corner, a gentle smile playing on her lips. Finally, Sophia let out a long, slow breath, and a tiny, genuine smile touched her lips. It was different from her old effervescent smile. Quieter, wiser, perhaps a little scarred, but real. Well, Arthur Kensington, she said, reaching for a menu behind the counter. This is a place of business, and customers are always welcome. She handed him the laminated menu. The Reina Pepiada is very popular today, and the coffee is freshly brewed. What would you like? It wasn't absolution. It wasn't a reunion, but it was an opening, a chance, offered freely this time, on her terms, in her space. A chance for a new beginning, built not on deception, but on the hard-won truths of their shared, complicated past. Arthur felt a profound sense of relief wash over him, mingled with a humble gratitude. He looked at Sophia, truly saw her, strong, resilient, the creator of her own beautiful reality. I think, he said, meeting her gaze with a tentative smile of his own, I'll have the Reina Pepiada and a large coffee. I have a feeling I might be spending a lot of time in Bayside from now on. As he sat down at a small table near the window, the comforting aroma of the cafe enveloping him, he knew the road ahead was long. Rebuilding trust would take time, patience, and unwavering honesty. But for the first time since that fateful night on the street, Arthur Kensington III felt not like a king in his castle, but like a man who had finally found a place where he might truly belong. The real work, the real connection, was just beginning. What? An incredible journey of resilience, dignity, and unexpected connection. What part of Arthur and Sophia's story resonated most with you? Was it his time as Marco, the revelation, or this quiet, hopeful new beginning? Let us know your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. We truly value your insights. And if this story touched you, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you won't miss our next inspiring narrative. Thank you for being part of our community.